Hey guys, what's up and welcome to today's live Q&A. Now, of course, today is the final live Q&A session of 2023, but don't worry, we plan to continue all throughout 2024. So we've had how many here? 8 questions come in this week, which I will get answered during this video. But the one thing I do want to do just before I move on is double check that I'm streaming live and I have sound in our channels because cool, we do have sound. The reason for that is my previous live Q&A last Saturday, halfway through the sound went funky and dodgy and dropped out. So hopefully that doesn't happen today. But don't worry, I'll re-record any of the answers I gave last week that are sort of difficult to hear. And I'll get those uploaded in the next few days. So let's get into it so we don't waste too much of your time, people. Right, so our first question is... this one's coming from Douglas. It is, over the holiday period, I've eaten too much, too often, grazed, and eaten the wrong things. To get back on track, is fasting a good kickstart? And if so, can you give some tips, please, about how best to fast and what to do and what not to do? If it is something to try, for how long or how frequently should fasting be attempted? Okay, cool. So the first thing I will preface this question with is, if we were to dig into this in depth, this would be a whole 30 to 45 minute session just on fasting alone. So I won't go into all the specifics and nuances and so on. But one thing I will say is, okay, so many of us over Christmas will have what we consider overindulged. We will have eaten too many of the wrong things. And therefore, we're now feeling like, holy shit, I need to get back on track and get myself back in gear. And one of the things that we like to do is kind of go all in, like do something crazy or extreme to make it feel like we're taking a massive effort in order to rectify the mistakes that we've made over the past week, 2 weeks, and so on. Now, fasting itself is not a problem and is okay to use. The problem, I would say, is maybe the potential energy behind it. It's that thing of, holy shit, I really let it go over the past 2 weeks. I now need to either, depending on where your mind is at, punish myself for being naughty and sort of starve myself back to health, which doesn't work in that way. The other thing is desperation. It's like, holy shit, I let it go so much. I'm now desperate to get back on track. I need to do something drastic in order to shift me back in alignment. So if either of those two energies are the energy that you're approaching this with, now this will, of course, require you being honest with yourself about how you're approaching this. If you are approaching the New Year period with that desperate energy or that punishment type energy for being such a naughty boy over Christmas, then I would recommend that you don't fast. Instead, you just get back on track. You know exactly how to eat. Most of us know what we should be eating, what we shouldn't be eating, and so on. We may not know the perfect meal, but most of us know what healthy is versus what's unhealthy. So what I would say is, for most of us, just getting back to normal, back into a more healthy rhythm is a better approach to take. Now, if you did want to use fasting as a kickstart, it can be done. Now, the catch is there are lots of different options, and it's like, well, which one's the best one to use? Do I use a 16-8 protocol? Do I use the 24 protocol? Do I use a 1-day fast? Do I use a 2-day fast? Should I fast for 7 days? And so on. Like, there's so many different options depending on the outcome or the effect you're looking for it to have. Now, if you've never done a fast, I wouldn't necessarily recommend any of the 3-day, maybe not even a 2-day fast, because for some people it's just too much. And especially if we don't know how to prep going into a fast. So what tends to work best for most people when beginning these types of things are things like the 16-8 protocol, which is where you eat within an 8-hour window and then you'll fast for 16 hours. Now, we have to remember that the majority of us fast daily anyway, because every time you go to bed, you sleep, obviously for an extended period of time for most. And then when we get up, we have breakfast, which essentially means to break fast. So to a degree, we're all already fasting. But with a 16-8, it is a strict or more specific protocol within specific windows. For example, for most people, their eating window or meal window will be within the hours of 12 lunchtime and 8 p.m. in the evening. So you would get all of your daily required calories in during that period of time. And then from 8 in the evening back around till 12 o'clock the next day, you would fast. Now, what most people do with this particular protocol is they will train just before they're about to break the fast. So it's like I train or I exercise, and then I do that just before midday. And then at midday, I can break the fast and have my largest meal of the day that is ideally proportioned for my specific goals, whether weight loss, building muscle, or maintaining health, and so on. So that's one option, is the 16-8. The other option that some like to try is the 24. So instead of having an 8-hour window, you have a 4-hour feeding window and a 20-hour fast window. Now, this doesn't work for everybody. And to be honest, no fasting protocol works for everybody. It will depend on your individual physiology, how sensitive your system is, your autonomic nervous system and your hormonal system, etc., how responsive it is and how sensitive it is to different stimuli will determine how well or how good you feel when doing these particular protocols. So the 24 is another option to try. If I'm honest, though, the best, not necessarily the best, but probably the most ideal option for most people to try when beginning, if they wanted to do more than just a 16-8 or a 24, is just a single day fast. So you'll pick one day. Say, for example, you might pick, right, well, next Saturday or maybe January the 1st, I'm going to have my first fast day. Now, what you would then do is have a 24-hour fast. So you would finish your final meal, say, for example, at 10 o'clock Sunday evening or 8 o'clock Sunday evening, and then you wouldn't eat again until around that same time the next day. Now, what we have to be mindful of is not disrupting blood sugar too much or going into a fast with elevated blood sugar. So our final meal, we wouldn't want it to be excessively starchy or full of sweets and junk and treats, because it's like, oh, I'm going to starve tomorrow so I can get away with all the good stuff, as in the good stuff. We can't really do that, because then we're likely to experience blood sugar drops and fluctuations and a greater stress response in the nervous system than we need. So what we would do is finish on a good, well-balanced meal that's ideally fairly high in protein and fat, with a fair amount of fibrous carbohydrates or fibrous veggies and things with it, so that we don't disrupt blood sugar too much. Then obviously we have our fast the next day. Some people like to fast using things like fasting teas and so on. You want to stay well hydrated. But of course, we're avoiding food until we get round to our first meal, which again would be at around, if we've just finished at 8 p.m. the previous night, now around 8 p.m. the following day, we would have our meal of the day to break the fast. Now, what we would do with that is, again, have a fairly well-balanced meal, make sure there's plenty of good protein, make sure we've got plenty of healthy fats and some good fibrous veggies and things in there. Again, we don't want to disrupt blood sugar too much, and we don't want the meal size or portions to be too big either. So we don't break it with a massive meal, particularly on our first attempt, because obviously the stomach hasn't had anything for 24 hours roughly and so on. So we break it with a moderate size meal, and then we go to bed. And then, of course, from the following day, we eat back in our normal routine or on the healthy regime that we're planning to pick up and so on. So we would do it that way. So fasting is definitely not essential or required for most people, but some people do enjoy it. They feel they get good benefit from it. As a therapeutic intervention, I think it's great and can be used by a lot of people for good results. But it is definitely not something that is needed by everybody. So just listen to your body and basically adjust based on what your body tells you, based on your experience with it. So if you feel like absolute crap, then maybe you do want to eat something and sort of build up to a full day fast rather than just go all in this first attempt. So I hope that helps. If you want me to dig into this deeper or give other protocols, of course, just drop a comment, let me know. But if not, hopefully this is enough information to kind of help you get started with that. Right, so our next question is, now these next two questions are kind of similar, so I'm going to answer them together. So the first one is, question 2 is, how do you know whether a vegetable is fresh? For instance, a carrot or salad. And number 3 is, could you be eating old carrots and other things that are no good at all? So they're kind of similar. So I'll answer them both together. So how do we know if a vegetable is fresh? Now, the truth is, these days, if you're just buying from a supermarket, we don't necessarily know that it's fresh. We assume that it's fresh because it's in the fresh food aisle, and it's likely to be healthier for you than the junk packaged stuff and all the rest of it anyway, whether it's fresh or not. But the catch is, for a lot of the foods that are sold in our supermarkets, particularly the cheaper stuff, what we often find is that, unfortunately, it's been in storage for multiple months and maybe even up to a year in certain cases. And as it's been in storage and obviously been sprayed with chemicals or injected with certain chemicals to slow the metabolism of the fruit or the vegetable, that way we don't necessarily know that it is fresh. And I'm sure you've all seen the documentaries and the footage on this, where they've got the big warehouses or storage containers full of these fruits and veg and things that's just kept in these environments so that the metabolism slows and so that it lasts until they need to then ship it around the world and sell it on. So we do have to be careful. Now, ways with that we can obviously guarantee that we're getting fresh food, or at least make it far more likely, is to grow it ourselves. Now, of course, I understand that's not as convenient, but taking responsibility for our own food and our own produce and so on is a great way to do it if you want to get involved in that. Now, of course, that will then guarantee it's fresh because you'll be the one picking it from your garden. You'll be the one that planted it, grew it, and nurtured it, and so on. So there is that option. Now, the next best thing is get to know other people in your local area, community, even farmers and so on, who are producing these things. So who are growing the crops and the veggies and the fruits and things that you might want to consume. Get to know them and obviously learn a little bit about how they do their thing to find out if their food is of a high enough quality for you to want to eat. And then you would make sure you get it from them. It's like, oh, he's just had a harvest of this, that, or the other, so I will go and buy my produce there. And quite often, a lot of the local farmers, if they happen to sell local, they'll sell it to the local farm shops and food stalls and things like that. And of course, you can buy direct from those, which tends to I don't necessarily want to say guarantee, because sometimes stuff is still bought in, but it makes it far more likely that you're getting healthier, fresher foods if you're buying from a local farm shop that is buying and sourcing locally, rather than people that are shipping stuff in from all over the world that could be from anywhere. It could have been picked up at any point or harvested at any point and maybe been in storage. So that's a way to do it. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of time and research on our own behalf, unfortunately, because what's available in each different area, not only in your local communities, etc., but also on a global scale, what's available to me here in Ipswich might be different to what's available for somebody in Orange County, California, for example. You know, they're going to be different things. We're going to have different things available. So just based on that, sometimes we need to do a little bit of research of our own based on our own local area. And then that way we can guarantee, or at least give ourselves the best potential chance of getting high quality fresh foods that we know is actually going to serve us and not necessarily come full of a load of contaminants as well. So that's how we would make sure that we're getting fresh food. And then could we be eating old carrots and other things? Well, yes, we could, as I've just mentioned, because of the fact that often these things have been in storage for longer or extended periods of time. So yeah, just be mindful of that. Okay. Now, just to kind of, I guess, expand on this a little bit, what we have to also remember, though, is that for most or many of us, we're often eating a lot of junk. Most of our foods that we eat are convenience foods, and they're beige and they're prepackaged and they're full of preservatives and all kinds of crap. So even just switching to these fresh, as in fresh fruit and veg that we're buying that might have been in storage, for many of us, that's still going to be a lot better than what we have been doing, because at least we are getting the fruits, the veg, the fiber, and some of the nutrient content that may still be available and so on, that we weren't necessarily getting from the packaged junk or the processed junk that we've been maybe relying on for an extended period of time. So really, it's always about doing the best you can with what you've got and what you have access to or what you can afford, and then gradually expanding what you can gain access to as you find a rhythm, as you find a groove, and as your means allow. So hopefully that helps on those two questions. Now, our next one is number 4. What about cooking meat? Can you cook the hell out of it? So yes, you can. Most of the time with meats, particularly if it's like portions, yeah, as in like joints and things like that, generally speaking, we want to do the low and slow approach. Now, of course, there are lots of other ways depending what we're doing. But generally the low and slow, one, it will help to break down the proteins and things, so it makes the meat a little bit more easily digestible. But it also, being low and slow, helps to prevent too much damage to the enzyme content within the meat and so on, that will help us to break it down and digest it. What we have to remember is that it takes life to give life. So that's why ideally we don't want to rely on prepackaged processed junk all the time, because yes, it will give you an energy hit in terms of its caloric content, but because of the limited nutrient content, often we won't get health and vitality from it. So you get this, what we call empty fire. It's like this whack of energy, but with no real substance behind it, no nutrient density, and therefore no life-giving essence. So therefore, yes, it gave you energy that then often we crash from, but it won't actually be able to sustain life over an extended period of time. Now, of course, we don't necessarily eat it and then just die, but what we find is our health slowly dwindles and our vitality lessens over time when we're engaging in too much of this junk for extended periods. So that's why we would want better, more high quality foods where possible. Now, coming back to the meat, yes, you can cook the hell out of it. Now, of course, where you like your meat cooked, as in, do you like it rare? Do you like it blue? Do you like it medium rare and so on? That's obviously going to be different and an individual taste for each of us. But I would say even if you're doing the well done thing, generally speaking, low and slow is better than high and fast. Now, of course, we like to, if you're cooking steaks and things and you're searing it, that's fine. We just don't want to overcook for extended periods of time at too high a heat, because that will then damage the meat, damage the proteins, and potentially create carcinogens and so on. So we just want to be mindful of that. And yes, do not overcook your meat where possible. As a follow-on question from this, also related to meat, was number 5. Number 5 is, can you catch things from meat if you don't cook it enough? Steak, for instance. So as a general rule, yes, you can catch things from meat, but that would more be a case of if it's not the healthiest of animals. And this would be like, oh, actually, I've had this steak, it's sat around for a while, it's maybe a bit old and so on. So if you've got food that's sitting around for a while and can gather and gain bacteria and so on, then yes, you might catch something from it. The other thing that people tend to be fearful of or worried about is catching parasites and things like that. Sorry, I just grabbed some water. Parasites and things are also a potential that we can get from certain meats, particularly, again, if the animal is unhealthy and happens to be infected with parasites itself. And generally what we get is not necessarily the parasite itself, but we get the eggs. Now, you hear these kind of rumors of, oh, you need to make sure your meat is well cooked and hot all the way through because that will kill off anything that's in it. Well, that's only an issue if it has something in it. As I say, if it's a healthy animal and a healthy cut of meat, it's not something you have to worry about if you like your steak rare or blue or medium rare and so on, because obviously then it hasn't been heated all the way through necessarily. But you don't have to worry about parasites if there's no parasites there. Now, if you do have a piece of meat that you know has had it in, personally, I would just say, well, dump that piece of meat. Or if not, if you are suspicious, then yes, of course, make sure you cook it, heat it all the way through. And then that way it will kill off anything that might be in there that could be of detriment to your health. So yes, you can catch things from meat, but then technically you can catch things from anything. Even vegetables and fruits and grains and so on can be contaminants for toxins, for parasites, for fungus, for bacteria and all sorts, particularly grains, nuts, seeds, legumes, cereals, pulses, and all those types of things, because of the way that they're often stored and the fact that they're often old and harvested an extended period of time ago. Then what we can often find is they will have mycotoxins and mold and fungus and all kinds of things where they've been kept in storage. So that's why I always talk about get the freshest thing you can where possible, prep yourself. and keep things as close to as nature provided them as possible. Because often if things have sat around for extended periods of time, or they come in these processed forms, we don't really know the quality of the food that we're getting. And that goes for whether it's meat or any other type of food that is out there. So I wouldn't fear meat. I would just make sure you're buying the best quality you can with what you have available to you. Cool. So hopefully that helps on that one. Number 6, how long should you take to eat a meal? Okay, nice, easy one. Around 20 minutes. So this is because on average, it takes around 20 minutes for the body or the brain to signal satiety. So this is regardless of whether you sit down and kind of scoff your face as quick as you can, or whether you slowly take your time. Now, if you've heard me talk about my slow down and listen rule, which is part of my 3x3 metabolic meal method, you will have heard me talk about this before. When we talk about slow down, this is what we're referring to. Most people eat way too quickly and therefore don't necessarily chew their food enough. And of course, you can argue, well, we have hydrochloric acid in the stomach, and obviously it goes through the digestive system, and we have enzymes and this and that, and the peristaltic movement of the digestive tract and so on helps to break down food and all the rest of it. And yes, it does. But if we actually slow down and chew our food more and into smaller pieces, that makes it much easier on our digestive system to run our food from mouth to anus, but also to extract the nutrients, etc., from the food that we're consuming. So in an ideal world, yes, we would slow down. And on average, we want to take around 20 minutes to finish our meal. Now, if you take longer, absolutely fine. If it's a small meal and it's quicker, okay, that's cool. But if you've got a full, what you would consider a full meal for you, slow down, take your time. We would always sort of say, well, what's your hurry anyway? But there should ideally be no anxiety, angst, pressure, stress, or anything like that around your meal time. So like we recommend, ideally don't watch TV, especially things like news. If you are going to watch TV whilst eating, then you would make sure it's something lighthearted, maybe a comedy or something, nothing that would negatively arouse your emotions. Because whenever that happens and our body shifts towards a fight or flight response, that means that digestion begins to slow and get shut down. Because anytime we're stressed, the body will divert blood, energy, nutrients, oxygen, resources away from the digestive system to the working muscles, as into the musculoskeletal system, or the muscles of the musculoskeletal system, plus the heart, brain, and lungs, in order to prepare us to fight or flight. Whereas rest, repair, regeneration, digestion, etc., all takes place on the opposite side of the nervous system. So where possible, we want a calm eating environment, and we want to slow down, take our time, and on average, take around 20 minutes to finish our meal. And what often we find is we actually realize we need far less food to feel satiated, because you've taken your time and given your body the opportunity to recognize that it's had enough food because you didn't eat it so quickly. What often happens is, oh, I've reached this point. I actually feel like I've had enough now. And we don't necessarily feel like we need to finish the meal, because some of us are also caught in this idea of, oh, well, I can't leave the table until I clear my plate. Often stories, narratives, and issues that we picked up from our parents when they thought they were doing the best for us, but often weren't. So, oh, you can't leave the table until you've cleared your plate. So then we, as adults, grow up believing that regardless of how much food is on my plate, I shouldn't really be leaving the table unless I've cleared my plate. And then what happens is, as a result, we often overeat, not because we're actually hungry, but because of a story we have running in our mind that says we're not allowed to leave the table until our plate is clear. So just bear that in mind. Take your time, slow down, nice calm eating environment, and on average, take around 20 minutes to finish your meal. Okay, so our next one is number 7. What fruit is best for you and what is the worst? Cool. So I love questions like this because they always give me the opportunity to say, well, it depends, which always seems like a cop-out answer. But the truth is it does. Because, yes, we're all human. Yes, we're all similar. And, we all digest food in similar ways as a whole. We are also unique biochemically. Each of us are biochemically individual. And as a result of that, we react and respond differently to certain fruits and veggies and foods in general. So what works for you and you feel awesome on may not work for me, and vice versa. So you might find that you fucking love apples and you thrive on them and they make you feel great. Whereas I might find they make me feel like shit and give me gas and bloating and indigestion. Whereas oranges might be fine for me, but not for you, and so on. So this isn't a case of, oh, one thing is good or one thing is bad. It's what do you bring to the table physiologically that's going to influence how your body deals with this particular food. And the same goes for any meat, fish, veg, herbs, spices, fruits, grains, and all the rest of it. Each of us are individually unique. And then as a result, we process different foods or react to different foods in different ways. Now, if we were to sort of say, well, what's the best and what's the worst? What we might want to consider is fruits or veggies that are high what we call FODMAP. Now, the FODMAP group is essentially they are fermentable sugars. So we've got fructo FODMAP. So fructo, oligosaccharide, disaccharide, and monosaccharides, and so on. So these are the different sugars that tend to be fermentable in the gut. So you may eat them, you might really enjoy the particular fruit or the veg or whatever the thing might be, but your digestive system maybe doesn't get on with it as well as it could. And it could be due to bacterial profile, could be due to your own unique biochemistry and so on. But often what will happen is you'll eat them and then those particular sugars will ferment in the gut. And as a result, can cause gas, can cause bloating, indigestion, can cause inflammation in the gut through the intestinal tract and so on. And as a result of that, yes, it might have been a nice fruit and, oh, well, fruit's really healthy. Yes, it can be, and it's high in fiber or high in nutrients. But for some people, certain fruits or certain veggies might actually be of more detriment to their health than they are of benefit. So if you know that there are certain things, or if you eat them and you notice these negative symptoms that arise post consumption, then it may be a good idea to either temporarily remove it 30 to 60 days and then try again, or just wipe it out and find a replacement. Because there is no single food that we must all have in our diet in order to thrive. You know, if there's something that doesn't work for you, that's fine. There will always be an alternative that will work for you. We just sometimes have to be a bit more willing to put in a bit more effort, take a bit more responsibility of ourselves or for ourselves, and therefore find the specific things that will work for us as individuals. Yes, it can take a little bit more effort, but unfortunately, health, whether we're putting in this additional effort or not, health these days is not simple anyway. It's not necessarily easy because of the busy, hectic lifestyles that we have, and the fact that the industry as a whole, the food industry plus the health industry, is not fully on our side. Like it's set up in ways to kind of help keep us almost a victim of it and not quite healthy, so that we need to rely on doctors and pharmaceutical companies and all the rest of it. And that's not me trying to be sort of morbid or dramatic about it, but it's the truth. When you follow the money trail, you sort of see how this system is designed. And really, it's just designed to make you profitable to them. So that's why I always bang on about ruthless responsibility of self. We need to take responsibility for ourselves. And sometimes as a result of taking that responsibility, it means we need to put in a bit more effort to make sure that the things that we're doing are actually serving us as individuals. So there is not really a best or worst fruit. It's what do you bring to the table, but just be mindful of fruits that are high in FODMAP. Actually, speaking of FODMAP, one thing I will mention, let me just remind myself of the name of the app. There is a great app called, no, it's actually called FODMAP. So there's an app called FODMAP, but it's by the Monash University. I don't know if you can see this. I don't know if my camera will. There you go. Monash University FODMAP diet. So this app is one of the best apps you'll find. And the Monash University, I believe, at least when I last checked and got this app myself, they're one of the leading authorities on FODMAP foods and FODMAP alternatives and FODMAP diets and so on. So if you do think you might have an issue with fruits, veggies, and things like that, or foods in general that might be high in FODMAP, then this is a great app to use. it's got lots of good information, full lists of all different foods. It also gives you in fact, if I show you here quickly on the food guide. So fruit, let's just click on fruit. Let's go apple, Granny Smith. So for example, if I was wondering if I have a problem with apples, Granny Smiths, for example, I can go to apple, Granny Smith, unpeeled and raw, and it will tell me the particular sugars that Granny Smith apples are high in. So for example, one serving, so one medium size apple has fairly high levels of fructose and sorbitol. Those are the two sugars that are a bit high, whereas lactose is okay, mannitol is okay, GOS is okay, and fructan's okay. Now, if I wanted to have it, but found that high levels of fructose or sorbitol don't work for me, maybe I could get away with a half a portion instead. So you can reduce the portion or find portion sizes that might work better for you. I know you can't really see what this says because it's gone blurry. Yeah, there you go. So based on that, you'll be able to pick out what works for you for each individual fruit and so on. So that's a great app to use if you are unsure. So that is the Monash University FODMAP Diet app. Just type in FODMAP in the App Store or on Google Play, I imagine. If I can get this to focus once more. If you just look at that little symbol here, that's the icon you're looking for. That's the app icon, okay? So that will then enable you to download that if you're unsure or that's something you want to look into, especially if you're someone that suffers with a lot of gas, IBS, digestive disruption, and things like that. Then perhaps you have some FODMAP issues. Cool. So I'm glad I remembered that. Right, now our final question. How is nutrition for kids different from adults, say 4 and 5? Okay, so what we have to kind of look at really is it's not just, oh, it's different, like as in a whole, they should be eating one particular way and you should be eating another. It's more to do with ratios and understanding what's going on physiologically. So a 4 to 5 year old child or a child in general that's growing is in what we call a very anabolic state. So they are in a rebuilding, repair, restorative state because obviously they're growing. They're in a growth phase or a growth state. So because of the fact they're in that state, we need to provide nutrition for them that's going to support that. So they're going to need lots of protein. Now, this doesn't mean, again, put them on a high protein diet, but think about it. They're going to be building new tissue all the time. So they're going to need good levels of protein. They're going to need lots of healthy fats to help with repair of cells and turnover of cells and cell membranes and brain development and so on. And they're also going to need healthy vegetables and carbohydrates and so on, because they're going to need the vitamins, the minerals, the nutrients, and so on, which of course come from the proteins and fats as well. But obviously there is a good dose of them also in their fruits and veg. So they're going to need, where possible, supporting with good, healthy foods. The catch that we see these days is everyone is so bloody stressed out and wired and tired and all the rest of it, that even though they opt for convenience for themselves, they also opt for convenience with the child. There's anything to keep them quiet, anything to shut them up. So they end up feeding their children the same junk and crap that they're often feeding themselves, and sometimes even worse, because, oh, I'd rather just shut them up than actually deal with them and responsibly parent them. Now, I know that can sound quite harsh, and many of you might be triggered by me saying that, but it's true. I see it with my own family and friends and so on. Like, rather than stand in their true power and be like, you know what, I don't want my kid to have fizzy drinks. I don't want them to have sweets all the time. I don't want them to have cakes, biscuits, and crap just to keep them quiet. But that's what we end up doing. We succumb to the peer pressure often because we think that, one, we'll either the child won't like us because we're being cruel by giving them healthy food and not allowing them to have the junk, or we're worried about how other people, our friends, our family, and so on, might perceive us. Oh, well, they're boring. They're cruel to their child. They won't even let them have sweets and treats and so on. Now, personally, this is one of those scenarios where it's like, I'm not falling for the hype at the end of the day. So as a parent myself, and this isn't to say that my daughter eat perfectly all the time, but I will not, just because other children in the room are having sweets and snacks, that doesn't mean that my child gets to have sweets and snacks either. Like, she can have snacks, but there'll be healthier versions that we we have on what we would call our allowable list as such, rather than just giving her the junk or the sugary crap that these other kids are eating and then running around like lunatics with. So kids, believe it or not, in some regards, need even higher levels of nutrition than we do. They need to be on what we would almost call a calorie surplus, a bit like if you were trying to build muscle yourself or to gain weight yourself. They need to be on that surplus because they're using more energy and their metabolism's higher and they're in this constant growth state. So we need to fuel that. But ideally, we fuel it with good, healthy foods, healthy proteins, healthy fats, healthy carbs, okay? Now, as adults, the truth is we need the same. We don't necessarily need the excess or the abundance or the surplus, but we do still need the same level of quality and nutrient density in our foods too, if we want to maintain the level of health we're at. You have to remember, life is kind of trying to wear us down. Society's trying to wear us down. The stressful shit we've got going on in our job, in the home, with our partner and all the rest of it, that's all kind of wearing us down and providing a stress load. Now, we need good levels of raw nutrients and resources coming in to give our body the physiological capacity to adapt to all those stress loads. If we don't, what happens over time is we get by. The body doesn't just immediately die because we've done something bad or we didn't eat well for a couple of weeks, but health and vitality will start to decline over time. Then we get aches and pains and stiffness and niggles, and then we're getting repeated or recurring illnesses, and then we start to develop metabolic conditions and so on. And of course, this all happens over a period of time. So we tend to ignore it because it's not like, oh, I was healthy today and poorly tomorrow. It tends to be more a case of, oh, I was doing well, and then over time I'm starting to get tired and a bit worn out and a bit sluggish, and then all of a sudden I've got aches and pains, and then I've got, oh, turns out my blood pressure's a bit high. Oh, turns out my blood sugar's all over the place. Oh, turns out my cholesterol's now high, and so on. And we end up developing these conditions over time because we've ignored ourselves for extended periods of time. So yes, a child needs high levels of nutrient availability because they are growing and developing, but we need it because of the stress that's going on in our lives that tends to be wearing us down, and we need to overcome that. So from that perspective, well, we all need to eat well where we can. And this isn't me, again, saying be boring and never eat all your sweets and treats and snacks. You can have those things, but you need to ideally have them just in addition to the good stuff that you're already doing that keeps you healthy. And then the healthier you are, the easier it is for your body to adapt to these sort of more negative scenarios, situations, and pressures that you've got in your life, as well as the negative foods that you might be introducing through your diet. So hope that helps. Yes, it's different, but at the same time, it's not really all that different. You know, if we're trying to stay healthy, healthy food is important for all of us at the end of the day. Cool. That is all 8 questions, people. So I'll just double check here on my comments list and just make sure that nobody has posted any new questions since we went live. No, we appear to be good. Okay, brilliant. One more check here on this other page. Okay, no, we are good, people. We are good. Okay, so of course, as I mentioned when we first opened this one up, this is the final one of 2023, but we will be kicking off as normal in the new year. So next Friday, I don't even know what the date is off the top of my head, but next Friday we'll be doing our next live Q&A session with all of the questions that have come in from this coming week. There may be a few new and interesting ones as people are rolling into the new year. So that will be good and fun. And of course, if you watching this have any questions of your own, feel free to post them in the comments beneath this video, or of course, post them in the Ask Tyrone thread in our private Facebook group. If you're not a member of that group, feel free to just come on over, click the link. The group is called Stronger Than Life Coaching. So if you go to Facebook, type in Stronger Than Life Coaching Group, then you will find the group, click the request button to join. And as soon as I see your request there, I will get you submitted in. And then, of course, anytime you have questions, you can just list them in the Ask Tyrone thread, which is posted fresh each week. We have a new one go up. You can ask your questions there, and I will get them answered for you each week, every Friday on average. I say on average because occasionally we have to do it on a Saturday if I'm on a course and things like that. But every week we'll get them answered for you so that you can continue to keep moving forward and pursuing your goals and crushing them as you move through 2024. Thank you for watching, people. As always, I appreciate your time and your energy being here, and I look forward to chatting with you in our next video. Take it easy, people, and chat to you soon.